about his health, which I guess I don't fully get either. It's confusing to me. He's posting pictures, dunking a basketball. He's in Baltimore taking pictures. He's on a podcast announcing this, and now everything kind of blows up. What happens with Maxx Crosby going forward?
Well, first off, when you fail the one physical, be careful. Call another sport. Correa failed the physical at the Mets. Went to San Francisco. They got nervous. They bailed. They ended up going back to Minnesota. Word spreads. Well, if the Ravens think he must be hurt, geez, I'm not going to go near him either. So that makes you think that Crosby, your point.
Let me jump on.
Maybe it's a cheap contract that you can, a cheap trade you can make and get him.
I do believe, at least in relation to that this morning, that Schefter and Graziano both talked about other doctors saying, listen, they believe that in a month or two, the physical will look a lot better. And the expectation is that he should be ready, at least full go, by the middle of August, early September.
Okay, but you got to take that on faith if you're another team.
Correct.
To make a move after the Ravens, a highly respected organization that's won a lot, bailed on him and had a need for him. That would make me, as a GM for another franchise,
not the first time they bailed up.
I would be concerned by that, Stevie. I would be concerned.
Not the first time they've bailed. Not the first time they've bailed. They've bailed on a couple of occasions in the past, which is what Peter Schrager informed us about earlier this morning. So we know that, the Ravens are sticklers for that. That doesn't mean, that they're not a first-class organization. They still are. But what it does mean is because they dot I's and cross T's so thoroughly, and in some people's eyes excessively, it does beg the question as to whether or not people will be hesitant to do business with the Ravens moving forward, because you never know how much of a stickler that they are, for details in terms of, the health of a player, as they should be. And I don't think anybody's blaming them for it. I just think that if you believe that a team is going to be a bit hardcore with certain situations in terms of making the deal, sometimes you might be reluctant to do a deal with that team and find an easier path of resistance. That's all I mean by that. Nothing negative at all.
Yeah, so in relation to Maxx, obviously this has got to go through your organization and your doctors, all that stuff. Philadelphia should be on the phone. Philadelphia should be calling the Raiders about Maxx Crosby and figuring out what the cost is right now. And I think the reality for the Raiders right now is, are they willing to take 60 cents on the dollar now, or wait and maybe they get 80 cents on the dollar in 3 months, or maybe they get 25 cents on the dollar in 6 months? So if I'm Philadelphia, I'm trying to have that conversation. If I'm Buffalo, who just restructured Josh's salary to get under the cap, I'm having that conversation. If I'm the Los Angeles Rams, I'm calling the Raiders. I think there's obviously a lot of teams that should be in that conversation, but I'm looking at teams that truthfully are, if I'm Kansas City, who has 2 first-round picks, and they just restructured, I believe, Patrick, to get into a salary cap situation, I'm making that conversation as well. So if I'm those annual Super Bowl contenders, and you think that you can get him at a lesser value than he was a couple days ago, absolutely. Philly, Buffalo, the Rams, Kansas City, all should be making those calls.
I just want to point out, the teams that were linked to Crosby in the beginning, we're not hearing about anymore, that also made bids. The Cowboys, the Jaguars, the Bears. Those have not come up in conversation.
The Bears should be a team making a call.
But that's the first time I'm hearing you say this. And this has been happening for the last few hours
because maybe Ryan Poles and the Bears weren't willing to part with 2 firsts because they're still in their building process. But maybe it's 2 seconds. Or maybe it's a second this year and a second next year that becomes a first if he plays 80% of the snaps this year or something like that.
Well, bottom line is they're not getting 2 first-round picks now for Crosby.
Right.
That's over with. They're not getting, if the Ravens weren't going to do it, no other team's going to do it. Plus, the Rams don't have a first-round pick. They can't trade him to Kansas City because
Rams have a first-round pick.
I thought they traded to McDuffie.
They have 2 this year because the trade, so they have 13.
They have 13. Okay. Yep. I thought they had traded that pick to get McDuffie.
29.
They traded the 29th and they have the 13th. All right, so I stand corrected. But I don't think they're going to sit there and trade him to Kansas City. It's a divisional rival. You can't do that and have him in your building twice a year.
Sure.
And that's a huge rivalry.
Sure.
Raiders-Chiefs is one of the biggest rivalries in sports.
Sure.
Buffalo doesn't have a high first-round pick. I don't think they're going to get the 2 1s for Crosby now after what the Ravens did.
2 2s, though? 2 2s?
Well, it's not 2 1s. And that's why the Raiders would be annoyed. They thought they got 2 1s. Crosby fans, the physical, they ticked off at the Ravens, and now they're stuck getting a lot less, as you said, 60 cents on the dollar. And they can't do it after the draft. They want to get this done before the draft.
Now,
It's a mess. Okay, so just to recap really quick, and then we're going to move on because, again, it was a huge sports day yesterday. We have a lot to get to. So Maxx Crosby, as of right now, is still a Raider. He is not a Raven. Trey Hendrickson is now becoming a Raven. They are working out their contract details. We'll see how this all transpires in the next 24 hours as it continues to evolve. Let's go to the...
But I think I would argue in my 30 years at ESPN is the busiest morning I can ever remember. The Baltimore Ravens wasted no time after last night their trade for Maxx Crosby because of a failed physical. This morning, within the last 20 minutes, segueing to Trey Hendrickson, who has agreed to a deal with Baltimore, 4 years, $112 million with incentives. It could be worth up to $120. That was from Schefter just moments ago, who has been working feverishly. Again, just Adam Schefter, so you know, this is a man who spoke to Neil Elatrash at 5 o'clock this morning and has been working nonstop ever since. So, Schefter, take us through it here. For those who are just joining us here, the Ravens have been awfully busy with what they did last night and what they do now this morning.
Well, listen, they actually had conversations with Trey Hendrickson about teaming him with Maxx Crosby. And when the conversation first started, Trey Hendrickson was of the mind that he would be in Baltimore if that's the offer that he would round up taking with Maxx Crosby. But alas, that didn't happen. Maxx Crosby was in Baltimore on Tuesday, went through a physical, did not pass the physical. There were images that were sent out to other doctors. Multiple doctors reviewed those images, including the Cowboys team doctor, Dr. Cooper. And in the end, with whatever information they had, the Baltimore Ravens felt like they were uncomfortable moving forward with the physical. Maxx Crosby had been on crutches until 1 week ago. He had surgery 2 months ago on his meniscus. Dr. Elatrash talked about his meniscus, his cartilage, his bone, and that Maxx Crosby is on schedule. But the problem is, where that is today is not where the Ravens felt like they needed him to be to pass that physical. And so this was the issue. The Ravens didn't feel comfortable moving forward on the deal, considering that it involved 2 first-round draft picks. They voided the deal. Maxx Crosby goes back to the Raiders. The Raiders are listening to other teams' call, but the plan right now is to at least hold on to him while they listen to offers from other teams.
So Mike Tannenbaum jumps in with us here as well. Mike T, you were a general manager in 2 different places. You obviously were involved in countless trades. This is always a piece of it. So there are people who are going to look at this. I want to make it 1,000% clear that no one on Get Up is suggesting that anyone did anything untoward here. That physicals are always a part of these deals. But there are people who are watching this, and you know what happens on the internet. People start to, oh my goodness, they backed out of it because they saw Trey Hendrickson was going to be cheaper than they thought, or whatever the case may be. Take us through how these processes actually work behind the scenes, how the sausage gets made, Mike T.
Yeah, Greeny. So again, a trade is a contract between Team A and Team B that has to be approved by the league office at 4 o'clock today. Typically, in that trade papers are conditions. The player reports and passes a physical. A physical is very subjective, and some teams will pass, a player, and other teams won't. It's going to candidly happen at the combine every year, where you'll see teams pass on certain players. The most famous example was Drew Brees. He failed the physical of the Miami Dolphins when Nick Saban was the head coach and went on to a Hall of Fame career with the Saints. So with that said, there is another team or two today that could make a trade with the Raiders for Maxx Crosby. And here's another interesting layer. You can put different conditions in a trade. So for example, let's say they trade to the Bills for a 2nd-round pick this year and a 2nd-round pick in 2027. And if Maxx Crosby plays 70% or more of the snaps in 26, the 27 2nd-round pick becomes a 1st-round pick. So there's ways you could work around this situation if you have a team that's willing to assume some of the risk.
Let me ask you a few more questions here. We'll fly through them quickly. The idea that all of these deals, literally everything we have heard Schefter and others report, starting on Monday at noon, all of these things are not official until 4 o'clock today. So we understand that almost any of them are fungible and teams or players could change